Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This morning, I am pleased to be part of a closeout ceremony focused on repudiating our Victorian approach to criminal justice in the OECS. A program or project focused on being able to say that our over-reliance on incarceration as a means to be able to solve crime is archaic and outdated. And as a replacement, it has said that we're not going to see young people as problems to be solved, but rather we're going to tap into their skills and their capabilities to be able to ensure that they are productive citizens. It is a program focused on diversion, rehabilitation, reintegration, and more so, at the premise, it is based on the philosophical underpinning that every young person deserves a second chance. I am Ryan Augustine Joseph, your Masters of Ceremony for this morning, and I am joined by my co-host, who will introduce herself, and thankfully at least one thing good has come out of COVID, that really she could be in another country and co-host with me, and you could see her literally as if she's right next to me.
Good morning, everyone. I am Marilyn Cuffy Morris, the project manager of the last mile of the Juvenile Justice Project Phase 2 and the mistress of ceremonies for this morning. Honorable ministers, the OECS Director General, His Excellency, Dr. Didacus Jules, representative for USAID, Eastern and Southern Caribbean, Mr. Clinton White, permanent secretaries, head of the OECS Human and Social Services Division, Dr. Colin Radix, heads of division within the OECS Commission, heads of units and officials from the member states, beneficiaries of the project, other stakeholders within the member states, specially invited guests, staff of the OECS Commission, the media, people of the OECS, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and welcome to this momentous event to celebrate the achievements of JJRP.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cuffy. I will now introduce Mr. Martin Anthony, who is the National Coordinator of the Juvenile Justice Reform Project in the Commonwealth of Dominica, to lead us in prayer. Please stand.
Almighty God, we want to thank you this morning. We thank you for your goodness and your love particularly for children and the efforts that have been made in the OECS through the OECS USAID Juvenile Justice System to come to the assistance of children. Lord Jesus, you know how often children are at risk, and the project was all geared at their rehabilitation, their rehabilitation and reintegration. Lord Jesus, we thank you for what has been achieved over the past years. And as we come to celebrate, we think also of the many young children who are at risk throughout the Caribbean. Oh Lord, we pray that efforts would continue to come to the aid of those children. Lord, it is you who said, suffer the little ones to come unto me, for such is the kingdom of God. Father, we thank you for all that has been done, for all the officials of the OECS Commission and USAID. USAID who has come and has injected so much resources to aid children in the Caribbean. We pray, dear God, that what has started would continue. Help the governments in the region to take it up from here, to continue injecting resources for the welfare of your children in the region. We celebrate this day, O God, for our achievements, and we pray that your blessings may descend upon what happens today, all for your honor and all for your glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please sit. Thank you very much, Mr. Anthony.
In the spirit of togetherness, umoja is the Swahili word for unity. Through unity, the convent high school's speech chorale Sign Language Club, and choir continue to achieve the goal of using the arts as a medium of discipline and creativity. The club has executed 5 musical productions and performed in numerous national and regional activities, including the 2019 World Creole Music Festival hosted in the Commonwealth of Dominica. Following Hurricane Maria, Umoja hosted a production, Bus Ride in St. Lucia, as part of its humanitarian efforts. The Sign Language Club gained international attention with the interpretation of the soca hit Family. Since then, the group has recorded the national anthem of the Commonwealth of Dominica and the religious piece Via Dolorosa. In addition, the club has won numerous gold medals at the National Schools Arts Festival in choral and speech and choir. Ms. Leandra Landa has been the director since its inception in 2006. We now invite Umoja CHS to present Lean on Me. Do enjoy.
Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sight, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me, we are strong, and I'll be your friend. I want you to so you
Don't be afraid to sing along, so you ready, go ahead with it. We just have to identify where they are now.
love
On.
This was indeed inspiring. I could not, you know, just think of what these young people can do on behalf of the, the young persons. And we thank them, that's Umoja Convent High School Sign Language Club, for this wonderful presentation and reminding us that we all need somebody to lean on the back. Okay? Back to you, Rahim.
Thank you very much for that, Miss Cuffy Morris. I do tell, however, in my room here that I don't think anybody sings karaoke. Because had they been, we know that for sure they'd be singing. In St. Lucia, it's my pleasure to introduce the Director General of the OECS, His Excellency Dr. Didicus Jules, who has continued to stand in the vanguard of supporting young people and being able to ensure that young people can claim their future and their destiny. And as he normally says, not as mere inheritors of the future, but as equal partners of development. Join me in welcoming the Director General of the OECS to deliver some brief remarks.
Before I start my remarks, I must say to our external audience that because of problems with the internet and the bandwidth, we were not able to hear. But perhaps that was fortuitous because this was a done by a sign language group. And if anything, it served to give us greater empathy for the hearing impaired. Honorable Dean Jonas, Minister for Social Transformation, Human Resource Development, and the Blue Economy of Antigua and Barbuda. The Honorable Addis King, Minister for Youth Development and Empowerment, Youth at Risk, Gender Affairs, Seniors Security, and Dominicans with Disabilities, Commonwealth of Dominica. The Honorable Philip Alfred Tellisford, Minister for Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs of Grenada. Senator the Honorable Gloria Ann Thomas, Minister of State with responsibility for social development and gender affairs within the Ministry of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs, Grenada. USAID Representative Mr. Clinton White. Dr. Carleen Radix, Head of Human and Social Division, OECS Commission, Permanent Secretaries of Social Development, Youth and Related Ministries, other OECS JJRP country teams, focal points, and OECS Commission project staff, other government officials, specially invited guests, media, colleagues. It is a pleasure to welcome everyone joining us for this very special ceremony. We have persons in the room and in rooms across the region, in St. Lucia, Grenada, Commonwealth of Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, and from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I'm also pleased that we have persons who are watching live on YouTube and Facebook. The Juvenile Justice Reform Project is another example of the vibrant partnership between the OECS and USAID that seeks to make a decisive difference in the lives of the people of the OECS. The JJRP, like most social development projects, is one whose impact could take years to materialize. We have had over 10 years of interventions seeking to change the landscape of juvenile justice. The project has sought not simply to create new pathways of opportunity for youth in conflict with the law, but importantly, to also reconfigure the processes and modernize the approaches to juvenile justice. Over the course of today's proceedings, you will hear a lot about the achievements of the JJRP. However, the major achievement is that over 450 young persons, children who came into conflict with the law, were given a second chance and diverted from the criminal justice system across the OECS. Think about the lives touched by each of these young people given a second chance. The laws, systems, and programs put in place through JJRP has greatly impacted many lives. Reparatory systems like this should not be taken for granted because every person diverted from a life of crime is a positive citizen created. We have come far, but we have learned lessons along the way, and there are still gaps. And so we look forward to continuing to partner with USAID in the child and youth justice space. In no civilized society can children in conflict with the law be treated in the same manner as adults who have broken the law. In fact, if anything, it is our fault if we need to ascribe blame. There is much work that needs to be done to create a justice system that, while being impartial in the administration of justice, is also rehabilitative in its processes and compassionate in its reconciliation of the fallen. We need to sustain and continue to build on gains made with legislation, ensuring that we have the regulations, the systems, and the programs in place to bring that legislation to full application. We need to pay attention further upstream to identify those who need to be diverted before they come into conflict with the law. And this would require that we create intersectoral strategies and proactive interventions in the education system, for example, so that the role of our schools in the inculcation of civic values, national pride, and personal responsibility is assured. We also need to look downstream at the youth who are legal adults, but still deserve a chance for change, and provide the necessary support in their transition to responsible adulthood. These matters are rendered even more urgent and necessary in the context of the overwhelming array of geopolitical, economic, climate, disaster-related conditions. The volatility and uncertainty of our times, and the severe economic constrictions suffocating our countries is fueling increased crime, psychosocial instability, and heightened poverty. It is our solemn responsibility to work together to build better and stronger societies and communities in this union of the OECS. Welcome once again and enjoy today's program.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jules. If I may reiterate, one of the important things that Dr. Jules mentioned is not only the continued partnership between USAID and the OECS, but really that what we're celebrating here today is 450 young people who have been diverted from the archaic, outdated Victorian approach to criminal justice and now have a second chance, and more so that in any civilized society such as ours, that children must never be treated the same way as adults who have been in conflict with the law have been treated. He said that our system must be compassionate, it must focus on reconciliation, and we must continue to improve our systems across through an intersectoral approach by ensuring that the education system inculcates the value system needed to be able to ensure that young people can be productive citizens. Before I go any further and turn this into a lecture on JJRP, I now invite Mr. Clinton White, who is the regional representative for the USAID. Before we do that, actually, Mr. White, I'm preempting here. We now have, fittingly, a video presentation about the project, JJRP.
The USAID OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project has changed the trajectory of child justice in the OECS. The OECS Commission continues to advance its social development agenda through the revised Treaty of Basse-Terre and the Strategic Inclusion and Strategic Protection Framework that addresses the promotion and support of equity and social inclusion within the OECS member states. The OECS Social Inclusion and Social Protection Strategic Framework supports the reintegration of child offenders and has aligned the USAID OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project to support this priority. In 2012, the OECS Commission and USAID collaboratively launched the Juvenile Justice Reform Project in 6 OECS independent member states, namely Antigua and Barbuda, the Commonwealth of Dominica, Grenada, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Over the 9 years of the JJRP, significant achievements have been made across the participating member states, shifting from a punitive system to one that is rehabilitative when dealing with children in conflict with the law. New child justice and childcare protection and adoption legislation guided by the international agreements such as the Convention of the Rights of a Child and the Riyadh Guidelines, has been enacted in 5 of the 6 participating member states. While Dominica has not enacted the Child Justice Bill, notable consultations and actions have been conducted to that end. One substantial change within the new child justice legislation is the age that a child can be held criminally responsible for committing an offense. Now, the legislation is consistent across member states, whereby children between 12 and 17 years of age cannot be tried as an adult, and more importantly, are now being diverted from the formal court process and instead receive psychological and other interventions geared toward their rehabilitation. To date, over 442 children have been diverted or have been given alternative sentencing and therefore have no criminal record. Diversion is the first pillar of the Juvenile Justice Reform Project and provides an opportunity to divert children from prosecution or the court and allow justice officials to work with the children, families, community members, and other stakeholders to holistically address issues. The diversion of over 442 children towards a rehabilitation program leading to reintegration into their communities has been a game changer, as the child justice system is now more rehabilitative.
Diversion have been taking place for years informally, but is now being done in a more formal way through the implementation of the Child Justice Act of 2013, which outlines the process and allows for the St. Kitts and Nevis Child Justice Committee to be the standing authority to divert and monitor juveniles who have come into conflict with the law. We started diversion through the CJC in late 2019, and thus far we have had 9 juveniles diverted through the committee based on diversion agreements. We have seen less juveniles going through the court process for simple offenses. Matters are dealt with in a more timely manner, more supervision is done, and more follow-ups as it relates to providing services to the children and families, and have resulted in a reduction in recidivism. Presently, we are in the process of putting together our diversion registration and monitoring committee. This committee will be tasked with ensuring that all registered programs or organizations are up to the standard and meeting the objective of the juveniles diverted to their programs.
Across the participating OECS member states, stakeholders have made significant strides in operationalizing the legislation to ensure that policies, systems, and operating procedures reflect and support the new child justice laws. Some of these measures include the development of diversion strategies, the development of a toolkit, and subsequent training to use the toolkit to holistically implement the 3 pillars of juvenile justice reform: diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration. Guidelines have also been developed to aid member states as they seek to establish juvenile justice reform management units.
In Antigua and Barbuda, the Child Justice Act 2015 came into effect on 1st October 2016, and a Child Justice Board, or centralized system for the hearing of juvenile matters, commenced in March 2018. Other systemic and structural changes included all juvenile matters are now processed through the family court, a designated prosecutor for juvenile cases was appointed, a probation officer from the Family and Social Services Division was assigned to work with the Child Justice Board and the Juvenile Court, and children in conflict with the law who do not have the resources to retain an attorney at law are now offered legal aid or pro bono services from private legal practitioners. The support from the USAID OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project in the establishment of these systems and structures has been tremendous. The new ethos that now applies to how children in conflict with the law are handled has firmly taken root within the social and legal structures of Antigua and Barbuda.
Capacity building to ensure that the requisite knowledge and skills for the full implementation of the new legislation and the establishment of a rehabilitative environment for children in conflict with the law was a priority for the JJRP. More than 1,400 service providers have been trained to improve the diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration services provided to children in conflicts with the law and their families. Training in a variety of areas including assessment training, training in TheraScribe, trauma training, 26 aggression replacement training sessions have been conducted with children in conflicts with the law, with 23 ART master trainers and facilitators trained, and 215 children having completed ART.
I took the ART program because I got into a serious fight at school, which led me to get 2 years of probation, and one of the conditions were that I had to take that program. The changes that I've made from the skills learned since the ART program, I am better at decision making, controlling my anger and environment. The ART program changed my life for the best. I'm mainly in a calm state of mind. I'm more driven towards my educational goals. I'm channeling my energy and free time into more positive activities.
Rehabilitation is the second pillar of the JJRP. JJRP's focus on this pillar included support for both the physical structures and the programming mechanisms that facilitated effective and impactful juvenile justice reform across the participating member states. Grand Barker-led Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center in Grenada, New Horizons, and Yes to Success in St. Kitts and Nevis were new facilities established during JJRP's lifetime with funding provided by USAID to support these physical structures. Liberty Lodge Boys Training Center in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia Boys Training Center, Boys Training School in Antigua and Barbuda, the Operation Youthquake in Dominica have received funding from JJRP to enhance their facilities, and all 6 are in receipt of equipment donations to support vocational skills training programs.
The USAID OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project, or JJRP, has been a huge player in juvenile justice reformation in Grenada. Grand Barker Rehabilitation and Treatment Center has benefited tremendously from the JJRP with funding for infrastructural changes and organizational design that made our center more child-friendly, to the provision of furniture, tools and manuals for the vocational training, civil works for the center. We have also received funding for a new education center and music training program. Throughout the lifetime of the JJRP, Barker has benefited significantly in the area of capacity building, and not just for our staff but all Grenadian stakeholders who interact with children in conflict with the law. At Barker, we have supported more than 200 young people in residence and others within the community with a variety of rehabilitative programs, both psychosocial and therapeutic and skills-based. In the last 3 years, we have had young persons who have been successful with a range of 3 to 5 CXC subjects based on our education program. We have had few persons leave the facility, start their own businesses, and others have become employable and have sustained employment because of the interventions experienced at Barker.
The third pillar of JJRP is reintegration. JJRP's efforts have focused on assisting member states to develop mechanisms and procedures to aid children in conflicts with the law as they reintegrate into society following their rehabilitation.
In Grenada, we have established a juvenile justice unit to ensure that every child living in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique will be supported to lead a crime-free life and make a positive contribution to society. I am the Community Reintegration Officer in the Juvenile Justice Unit, with responsibility for assisting clients in their rejoining of society and assisting them with the tools of becoming productive citizens. I have assisted children in conflict with the law in ways that include, but are not limited to, practicing motivational interviewing with clients, establishing a rapport with the children in conflict with the law. I build a connection with the children to better understand their situation, working in the best interest of the child, and using their skills and dreams to craft a unique reintegration approach that encourages growth, development, and productivity. Children in conflict with the law in Grenada have also been assisted in reintegration by enrolling in vocational and soft skills programs.
It takes a village to support the children of the region to ensure we continue to produce well-rounded and productive citizens to contribute to and lead future societies.
While I was at Boys Training Center, I got involved in the ARP project, Progression Replacement Training. I got involved in sports, boxing, football, traveled around the world, so this helped build my mind and open me up to different personalities and perceptions to life. Working with others and getting and mingling with different mindsets helps me open up my mind to life in a different way and see it as an opportunity to get something greater as I'm reintegrating in my village of Answer.
The JJRP and the many juvenile justice stakeholders have worked tirelessly to reform juvenile justice in the OECS participating member states to ensure that all children in conflict with the law get a chance for change. This message is brought to you by the USAID OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project, funded by the United States Agency for International Development. For more information, log on to oecs.org/JJRP.
Thank you very much. The Juvenile Justice Reform Project was made possible by partnership and funding of USAID, and it is my pleasure to invite the USAID representative for the Eastern and Southern Caribbean, Mr. Clinton White, to deliver a few remarks.
Mic check one. Oh. Good morning, everyone. All protocols observed. I'm really pleased to be here, this opportunity to join with the OECS and all of you in recognizing the work of the Juvenile Justice Reform Program. The OECS, member states, governments, civil society organizations, and other partners like UNICEF have worked diligently to improve the experiences of young people who come into contact with the justice system. USAID is proud to have partnered with the OECS as well as other donor partners to support this work, putting in place new legislation, or as in Dominica's case, completing actions to prepare for legislative changes, and also supporting the enactment of laws that establish a more rehabilitative and restorative approach in dealing with children in the justice system. There are numerous benefits to having justice systems that treat children differently from adults and to provide appropriate policies and programs that cater to the specific needs of young people in facilities and facilitate their growth and maturity into responsible adults. A system of justice that recognizes the development, peculiarities of young people and appreciates the differences in physical and emotional maturity of children in comparison to adults is able to prescribe appropriate measures of accountability for youth offenders. This is the system of justice that countries in the Eastern Caribbean pursued when they started the journey of child justice reform as early as 2002, and USAID is proud to have been a consistent partner in this work since 2011. Reforming a system of justice has required the work of all of us, working collaboratively and focused on a common goal. The work has become even more critical given the escalating violence within many countries in the region. Daily, we read the news articles and are not alarmed, and are not only alarmed at the situation, but are compelled to act. It is painful for me to see how these young people get into trouble and commit acts of violence or delinquent acts that cause them to get into trouble with the law. How is it that we have gotten so lost? How is it that these youth seem to not value their life or value the lives of their own brothers and sisters who might be the victims of their acts? It is not an easy question to answer, but we have seen some youth come to these programs because they are easily led, corruptible, We want them to leave these programs incorruptible. Some young people come to these programs angry and lost. We want them to return to their families and their communities with a new spirit, a new brightness in their eyes. They need to love themselves, know they are worth a second chance in life, know that their dreams that they once had for themselves are still possible, but they have to choose it by choosing themselves first. Through the collective action of JJRP program partners, important strides have been made to reform child justice systems and experiences of young people and their families. Some important results we've heard already in the video, but what I'll mention as a couple here. There's been a framework to guide formal diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration was developed, and countries are modifying this to their particular needs and developing the accompanying policies and regulations. More than 570 youth have been diverted from prosecution or serving a custodial sentence, and more than 1,400 service providers have been trained in various competency areas to improve diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration support to youth and their families. These results have been part of a process of transforming the child justice system. It has required the dedicated efforts of many people, agencies, and governments to reach the point, and there is much work left to be done. I'd like to congratulate Dr. Jules and other partners within the OECS Secretariat and all the government and non-government partners in the 6 Eastern Caribbean countries for providing leadership, staying committed in the work, and recognizing that our objective is to create a path for youth that provides a second chance and improves their chances of success. To our youth beneficiaries and partners, your ideas, voices, and talents matter, and USAID will work with our partners to ensure that you are involved in a meaningful way to determine the changes are made, that programs are designed to respond to the challenges you face and support your path to success in becoming responsible adults. There is worth in everyone. There is beauty in everyone, both inside and outside. We have the inner strength to overcome any situation in life. Don't let anything in your past determine your future. We have all made mistakes, myself included, but we can set a new course, and programs like the JJRP and others can lead you in a new beginning if you want it. I recall meeting the young man from St. Lucia, Lazare Montu, when I came here to visit once before, and I was very gratified to hear how the JJRP has supported his journey to reform and growth, provided him invaluable opportunities to build his skills, exposed him to new experiences, and guided him in a charted path to success. Because of Lazaric and many other young men and women like him, our work is as important today as it ever was. At USAID, we remain committed to child justice reform and supporting communities and supporting countries to fully implement the legislation that they have enacted, providing opportunities for youth who are in the justice system to be rehabilitated and restoring young people's connections to family and community. We look forward to strengthening our partnership with all of you, to realize that these commitments in our future partnership are really much needed. And lastly, please remember, none of us can win in this game unless all of us win. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. White. Remember that none of us can win in this game unless all of us win in this game. Over to you, Marilyn.
The real beneficiaries are the young persons who actually are able to turn their lives around because of the chance that they have been given. Let's listen to one man's story.
Back in 2018, I ran into some conflict with the law, which led me to being in a rehabilitation center. While I was there in the beginning, I thought all hope was lost. But then I found myself being engaged in a lot of rehabilitation programs and skill-based activities. Making better use of my time and then I started getting back some hope and began moving forward. Before I got into the rehabilitation center, I had some issues. I used to pray for something better in my life, and something better has come. Maybe not in the best way expected, but my life has changed for the better. In the rehabilitation center, I learned a lot of things that I used in my life today, like barbering and business skills. Today I am looking forward to being an independent barber, using my business skills while I continue to do skills training. We all deserve a chance for change.
Give our children a chance for change through diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration. This message is brought to you by the USAID OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project 2, funded by the United States Agency for International Development. For more information, log on to oecs.org/JJRP.
The OECS Data Conference was held from April 12th to the 14th under the theme Strengthening the Use of Data for Inclusive and Sustainable Human Development. The conference was supported by USAID and UNICEF and will now have excerpts from the panel on diverting children in conflict with the law, which included presentations from Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia, and Grenada.
I now hand over to Mrs. Fiona Richards-Charles for the presentation on child justice in Antigua and Barbuda.
Today I'll be presenting on the juvenile justice in Antigua and Barbuda and its impact as a result of the JJRP project. And with the support of OECS Commission and the JJRP project, we have been able to promote legislative reform, and as a result has gotten the implementation of the Child Justice Act of 2015. Whereas we had our criminal responsibility being at the age of 8, with the support of the OECS Commission, we now have moved to that of 12 years old. As a result of the support of the OECS Commission, we have also created varying programs to support both diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration. We have the DIVES program, which is diverting individuals via education and support. We have REACH, which is rehabilitative alternative approaches for children. Now, when we look at DIVES, DIVES is looking at different programs in terms of community aspects, in terms of art, in terms of supporting the individual themselves. In the JJRP Phase 2, we have the training of art for trainers. So we have several art trainers now. We actually are proud to say that we have at least 7 people in Antigua trained as trainers for art. And for REACH, REACH looks at a holistic approach as well, and more so in looking at the family. In addition to that, our legislative reform has also resulted in the development of our Child Justice Board and also our Juvenile Court, which ensure that minors are not exposed to the same criminal proceedings as adults. We also have our diversion unit, which is a part of the probation unit. Now, prior to the Act of 2015, all our officers worked with children. However, with the 2015 Act being implemented, we now have 3 officers assigned to work with children. They're responsible for doing assessments, such as the MAISY and the JIS, and also attend the Child Justice Board. Now, when we look at the impact of the laws of 2015, it has allowed us to gather better data. From 2017, as a result of the Child Justice Board, we would have had 4 boys, 17 girls, a total of 21 individuals going before the Child Justice Board. In 2020, development of new diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration programs with the support of OECS Commission JJRP project. However, we're still coping with the fallout of COVID. In 2021, we're still managing the impact of COVID. A lot of our programs were halted because of financial reasons, and also because in terms of the space allotted for persons in terms of the 6 feet, and knowing that many of our institutionalized areas does not have the 6 feet allowances. In 2022, we have started to implement some of our programs. Some of our programs are already up and running, and we continue to look forward to working with the OECS Commission and the JJRP project. Thank you so much for listening.
Our second presentation will be delivered by Ms. Beverly Ann Poyot, who is currently the Director of the Division of Human Services in St. Lucia. And I welcome Ms. Beverly Ann Poyot to present on the use of mental health screening and assessment tools in diversion in St. Lucia.
I welcome this opportunity to share with you some of the insights in terms of the use of some of the tools through the JJRP that we have been using here in St. Lucia. We will start by looking at legislative enactment. And so what happened in St. Lucia is that in 2018, we had two pieces of legislation which were enacted. That is the Child Justice Bill, which speaks directly to our children in conflict with the law, and our Child Care Protection and Adoption Act, which is the legislation that guides the Division of Human Services. So the tools that we currently use in St. Lucia is the MAZY tool, which is a mental health screening tool, also the SAVERY, which is the structured assessment, which determines the risk of violence. The JAIS is also used. It is a tool also used to determine the risk of reoffending. And then our data management system that we were trained to use is TheraScribe. Then we embarked on training our own personnel here in St. Lucia, and we had our first set of training in June 2017. And at that training, I think we trained about 30 persons from various departments. When that was done, persons went back to their departments using the tools, and then we had a second round of training, sort of like a refresher course, and also to assist persons who were having any problems with the tools that were being used. We had that training in 2018. Probation and parole, having more jurisdiction to deal with children in conflict with the law, they had a higher number of persons who were trained. So at the time, all of the probation officers within the departments were trained, and that is 9 probation officers. The probation and parole department now has separated responsibilities. So now they have 4 individuals who work specifically with children, and these persons too have been trained. The JAIS is another tool that they are used, and we have 7 probation officers who are trained in that tool. And thus far, we have 56 children who have been assessed using those tools, and then you have 15 who have been diverted based on, that is after the enactment of legislation by probation and parole. Only males were diverted, and the ages, most of them were 17 years. And this is my short presentation. Thank you very much.
Permanent Secretary Chrissy Wong Charles will now enlighten us on the reintegration perspective of child justice in Grenada. Over to you, PS Wong.
All right, great. So the juvenile justice landscape in Grenada, Carriacou, and Petite Martinique. So we're going to just basically have an overview, a very sharp synopsis as to what it is that we have been doing and where we are at in relation to the Juvenile Justice Project. Now, the Juvenile Justice Reform Project Phase 1 started in 2011 in Grenada. Right, the project played a critical role with creating institutional arrangements for juvenile justice system reformation in Grenada. These benefits included the enactment of the Juvenile Justice Act of 2012, which legislated the separation of juveniles in conflict with the law from adult offenders, right? So we saw that in 2013, we had over 39 juveniles remanded at Her Majesty's Prison, Richmond Hill, right? So as a result of this, the Act of 2012 legislated the separation of juveniles in conflict with the law from adult offenders. This therefore meant that the state had to make provisions to accommodate the separations. And as you see, in 2016, the Grand Bachelet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center was launched. For the treatment center, we had curriculum development of the residents, tools for vocational programs, training attachments for managers of the center in Missouri, USA, organization design and human resource structure. We also had staff capacity development and training plan. We had poultry farm equipment. We had support from USAID and OECS, computer labs, infrastructure and equipments. Those things, of course, are ongoing. The institutionalization of TerraScribe and justice management software and training, that too is ongoing, and many other benefits associated with a baccalaureate program. So we have many indirect benefits, such as the Juvenile Justice Act, the implementation plan, the National Juvenile Justice Policy, and a lot of these are guiding our interventions as we walk along with our juveniles. The development of juvenile justice assessment screening tools and policy, Savory and Maisie. Now, as we move along in the landscape of our juvenile justice system, right, we also recognize the rehabilitation process, which is based in the Grand Baccalaureate Juvenile Rehabilitation Center from 2016 to 2021. From 2016 to 2021, we serviced over 207 juveniles, 170 being males and 37 being females, and the number of residents, sadly, who recidivated between 2016 to 2021 were 40, being 37 males and 3 females, and the number of former residents currently imprisoned or were imprisoned between the areas between the year 2017 to 2019, we had 16, and the number of residents accessing education, academic and vocational training from 2017 to 2019 was 26.
Thank you very much, PS Warm Charles. And thank you very much to our other presenters, Ms. Poyot and Mrs. Fiona Charles Richards. We have heard 3 presentations today, and they have all given us a snapshot of some of the major components which have contributed to a more rehabilitative space for children in the child justice sector.
Thank you very much for these insightful, short but comprehensive presentations. We'll now go to the Permanent Secretary, Ms. Sylvain Bouton, who will deliver the remarks on behalf of the Honorable Minister, Dr. Addis King, who is the Minister of Youth Development and Empowerment, Youth at Risk, Gender Affairs, Seniors, Security, and Dominicans with Disability.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me recognize the Honorable Ministers who are here present with us today. His Excellency Dr. Didicus Jules, Director General of the OECS Commission, Mr. Clinton White, Regional Representative USAID for the Eastern Caribbean States, Dr. Carlin Radix, Head Human and Social Division of the OECS Commission, Permanent Secretaries and Directors from our various OECS member states, Project Manager, Mrs. Morris, National Project Coordinators, stakeholders, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen of the OECS, a very pleasant good morning to you. Let me first of all extend apologies on behalf of Honorable Dr. Addis King, Minister for Youth Development and Empowerment, Youth at Risk, Gender Affairs, Seniors, Security, and Dominicans with Disabilities, who is unable to be with us today. I will therefore present the Minister's remarks on her behalf at this JJRP closeout ceremony. I am honored to have been given the opportunity to deliver a few remarks at the closeout ceremony of the OECS USAID Juvenile Justice Reform Project. The conceptualization and initiation of the project, which has spanned a few years, brings to the fore tangible benefits which can be accrued when partnerships are forged. I speak here of the collaboration between the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS, and the United States Agency for International Development, USAID. Importantly, such a partnership also involves participating member states of the OECS. The USAID and the OECS Commission had in essence to develop an agreement, identify areas of focus, and member states through work plans had to execute certain programs and activities to the benefit of juveniles. Any project which targets children is indeed a very worthwhile venture. Children are vulnerable and often encounter certain risks which could have detrimental effects on their lives. They do need special care and attention. It has been pinpointed not only in research and certain literature, but also through the experience of practitioners that there is a close nexus between child care and protection and juvenile justice. I say this to mean that the child who experiences various forms of maltreatment, if not attended to, is at very high risk of possibly being engaged in certain misdemeanors. The effort made by the OECS and USAID in having a special project which targeted our juveniles is very commendable. Children do commit offenses, some of which may be serious. The question arises as to how they should be treated by law enforcement, established institutions like residential facilities, the probation service, and importantly, the courts of law. A point of reference in answering this question is the Child Justice Bill, which is now legislated in certain member states. The matter of due process is clearly articulated with heavy emphasis on diverting children from the criminal justice system. Every child needs a chance, even after having contravened the law. The opportunity for diversion is very essential. However, importantly also is the rehabilitation and integration of the child. While these have their merits, prevention cannot be overstated. This again calls for partnerships at all levels in assisting children to avoid engagement in actions which would necessitate the involvement of law enforcement and eventual appearance in court. I wish to place on record the gratitude of the government of the people of Dominica for the assistance received under the project. Time would not permit me to highlight every area of assistance. However, I wish to make reference to a few areas. Operation Youthquake is a facility which houses children in conflict with the law and also those in need of care and protection. That facility was badly devastated during the passage of Hurricane Maria and totally compromised. Through support under the project, the building was rehabilitated, furniture provided, and various other utensils. Further assistance was received in retrofitting the building, which now provides greater comfort and security to residents and staff. The assistance and guidance provided in regards to the OECS family model bills and attendant matters were of tremendous value. One target which was not met during the last mile is the development of a national strategy and standard operating procedures on diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration for Dominica. This is very important for us, and it is my hope that this would be considered in any future plans. Dominica also benefited from capacity development of practitioners working with juveniles. I refer to training of probation officers on the use of certain tools for the preparation of court reports. Individuals working in institutional settings with children were trained on how to effectively work with adolescents. Police officers were recently trained in regards to their roles under the Child Justice Bill, and funding were provided for public sensitization sessions on the family model bills. Training programs were administered to students under the ART program, that is assisting students in anger management and also resolution of conflicts through the peer mediation program, and the list continues. The project closes at a time when there is still unfinished business. I wish to submit that a head start was given under the Juvenile Justice Reform Project, and this in no way indicates that our respective governments have not been implementing certain programs and activities for and on behalf of children. However, the JJRP project helps spur us on. It is now an opportune time for us within the OECS to utilize the opportunities which were presented to develop new strategies and redouble our efforts into new pathways for children, especially those who are likely to fall prey as a result of having contravened the law. I wish to again express profound gratitude to the government of the United States, the OECS Commission, partnering agencies, and all our staff members who over the years contributed to the success of the JJRP project. May God bless everyone and provide the necessary guidance in our future endeavors. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam PS. Over to you, Marilyn.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard and we have seen a lot about the Juvenile Justice Reform Project. But during this section of the program, we are going to hear directly from the member states on the impact of JJRP. These member state reflections will be interspersed with creative presentations that show and tell how our young people have benefited from this important initiative. We now invite Ms. Torsha Simon from Antigua and Barbuda to deliver a poem.
Good morning. My poem is entitled Self-Control. When I've lost my temper, I've lost my reason to. Never proud of anything which angrily I do. When I talk in anger, I always utter something which I'm never. What? I'm gonna start over. My poem is entitled Self-Control. When I've lost my temper, I've lost my reason to. Never proud of anything which angrily I do. When I've talked in anger and my cheeks are flaming red, I've always uttered something which I wish I've never said. In anger, I've never done deed or wise for many things for which I should apologize. In looking back across my life, I've never meant a secret. In looking back across my life, I never remember a single time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Torsha Simon from Antigua, for delivering and sharing these words to us. Back to you, Rahim, with the presentation from Ms. Beverly Ann Poyot. Back to you, Rahim.
Thank you very much for your bravery today. So we will now go to the director who will present her reflection from St. Lucia. And there she appears.
Good morning again. Really sorry about that. So reflections from the Juvenile Justice Reform Project in St. Lucia. I have been fortunate to be part of this project from almost its inception, where we had the Juvenile Justice Phase 1. And so I just want to bring us back a little bit to look at the pillars that actually started this Juvenile Justice Project. So we had the harmonization of the legal and regulatory frameworks throughout the OECS. We had improved capacity for effective administration, modernized diversion, detention, rehabilitation programs. That initially was part of the juvenile justice first phase, but it was heightened. It was heightened in phase 2. And the fourth pillar, improved civil society linkages. So these were the pillars that the original project sought to look at. The national priority for St. Lucia was the reform to reform and improve the juvenile justice sector in St. Lucia. And like you have heard in many of the presentations, we were looking at what was really happening to our children. We noticed that our children were a segment of the population that seemed to have been left out. And so the Juvenile Justice Project really came at an opportune time for many of the OECS countries. You've seen and heard all of the countries which were involved in this. And I would like to make mention especially of some of the overseas territories which were part of our initial program. So we had countries like Anguilla, Bermuda, BVI, and I'm mentioning that because throughout this project with partners in so many different countries, it also allowed us to be able to have strategic partners in the different countries so that we could share ideas and be able to implement the processes and other actions necessary. Some of the challenges that we faced in the juvenile justice sector in St. Lucia, we had things like, we recognized things such as fragmentation within the juvenile justice sector. And for us in St. Lucia, that was a pretty big area that we wanted to close, in the sense that many of our services which were geared towards children were in different agencies and different ministries. And so what we were finding is that there seemed to be a lot of duplication of efforts. And so every agency or different agencies would be doing the very same thing. Some of the challenges we recognize is that the individuals who were involved in the Juvenile Justice Project were also persons who were spearheading or heading other agencies, and so the workload was pretty heavy, and so a lot of, with a lot of different responsibilities, and so a lot of prioritization had to take place. But I think that we were able to do it very well because we recognized that our children, it was being done for our children, and that was very important to us. Of course, it meant that the way we operated, our modus operandi had to change. There had to be more inclusion. There had to be more collaboration between our agencies. One other challenge is that public awareness when it came to juveniles and the rights of children and the way in which juveniles are dealt with within the system, we recognize that something had to be done in terms of public awareness as far as that was concerned. So in terms of improving the legal and regulatory framework, we sought to start by reviewing the harmonized legislation which the OECS had. We were able to look at regional and national juvenile justice strategies. And for us, this also was very important, and it worked very well. You've heard about the legislation which has been passed in many of the OECS countries. And so having that harmonized legislation, when we talk about countries working together, this was one area that we really saw this coming through, and being able to use the model legislation to propel us forward into having our own legislation within each of the OECS territories. So we had a lot of that advocacy happening, and that was very good for us. In terms of capacity building for effective administration, we looked at things like training within the various sectors, the sectors which really impacted our juveniles. We had risk assessment and mental health screening. You heard me speak to that earlier in terms of the Maisie and Savory. We had cognitive behavioral therapy, especially where we were looking at child development. How does the child's brain develop, and what it is we should be expecting of our children at various ages. We had TheraScribe, our data management system, and a manual developed for juvenile facilities, their operations. And I think that too was a big achievement, in the sense that for our facilities, it is very important for them to be at a particular standard, not just a local, regional standard, but also international standards. Capacity building, some of the other training that happened, I'm just going to skip a few of them because in the interest of time. One of them that I would really like to focus on is our trauma training workshop. For me, this was especially important because we recognize that a lot of the juveniles, a lot of the children, even those who were coming for care and protection, we recognize that a lot of those children were coming from a place where they had had prior traumatic experiences, and sometimes the behavior really was coming out of that. And so having persons trained in trauma now gave us the opportunity not just to work on the behavior or the presenting problem, but to be able to assist those children and juveniles in terms of whatever incidents may have originally caused the trauma. Modernization of diversion, detention, and rehabilitation. So you heard earlier the diversion framework, you heard about the toolkit, and all of these were enhanced. I have it here. All of these were enhanced through phase 2 of the project. And specifically, we had many conferences, at least 2 that I can remember, for our judiciary, our judicial sector, because of course, if they are not involved, then really what are we doing? So we had to have all of our services, all of our sectors involved. Unfortunately for us in St. Lucia, we were not able to include our police as we really wanted because of our peculiar situation in St. Lucia. However, we found some innovative ways that we could, after the fact, train our police because indeed they are our partners and they need to be part of that process. Some of the gaps that we recognized: for our juveniles, we have insufficient legal representation and legal intervention. Here in St. Lucia, we have a legal aid authority which does assist some of our juveniles, but that is on a very limited scale. Lack of implementation and implementation plan for the protocol document to guide the rollout of the Child Justice Board. This has not been done in St. Lucia. Okay, I just mentioned about the police, insufficiently trained staff in that area, insufficient avenues for diversion of juveniles. This is something that is still being worked on in St. Lucia, and I was really happy to hear in some of the other countries that they've been able to do it successfully. So I dare say that we will be partnering with them to see how it is we can move ours forward. Okay? Some of the strengths, let's look at the strengths. So we have the regional strategy and the accompanying national strategies. So the regional strategies, we each took that and we looked at it and tweaked it in order for it to become our own. The introduction of new tools and processes which we are now using to assist our juveniles, aligned to rights-based approaches for children. So everything that we do, we really take the child into account. We look at the international standards, the international treaties that we have all signed on to ensure that we are moving in the right direction. Some of the weaknesses we have found: I have here political changes, and this really speaks to the various the climate in St. Lucia, whereby we seem to have an issue with sustainability in some of our programs. And so we roll out the program, and while it is funded, it is moving along very smoothly, but the area of sustainability for some of our programs, that is where we really need to step up. Lack of resources and staff at the member states level, lack of project coordinators. For us, we had a lull in that area. I'm happy to know, to indicate that we do have a project coordinator now. And as I mentioned, sustainability plans. So some of our major successes, we have in 2022, the Domestic Violence Act was passed. And I put that there because while it does not relate directly to children, we do recognize that children are impacted by domestic violence more than we really know. And so I put it there because one of the things that that has been discussed, and I think that some more research has to be done in that area, is the impact of domestic violence on our children. We have the other 2 pieces of legislation, Child Care Protection and Adoption Act and Child Justice Bill, which were both passed in 2018. The Status of Children Bill, that is still pending, Child Maintenance Bill still pending, and Training in Therascribe, Maisie, Savory, and Art, all of which we are using and which we are very proud of. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beverly Ann Poyet from the Division of Human Services in St. Lucia. Marlon?
We now have an exciting spoken word presentation, which will be done by a local youth poet and public performer by the island of Nevis. The poem highlights the impact of the Yes to Success skills training and diversion program in Nevis, which was set up and supported partially through funding from the JJRP. The presentation is entitled The Before and After.
Yes.
Celia Titman writes the plight of youth. My prime of youth is but a frost of cares. My face of joy is but a dish of pain. My crop of corn is but a field of tears, and all my good is but vain hope of gain. My day is done, yet I saw no sun, and now I live, and now my life is done. My youth is gone, but I am still but young. I saw the world, yet I was not seen. No longer should this be our soul. Juvenile Justice Reform Program, abbreviated JJRP, spoke justice for Nevis St. Kitts Nevis youth as it was never before considered. Programs, services, and opportunities to touch our lives where it mattered. Training for youth workers who now better understand our plights, our hopes, and dreams. Systems in places so that we should no longer fall through society's seams. But can I get a witness?
I am a testimony.
Admit we shall. JJRP before you. Risk assessments, diversion, reintegration, and best practice interventions were not our norm. But what you have given us will help our youth transform. St. Kitts Explorers and New Horizon youth will long remember your name. Nevis Yes to Success skill training and diversion sites developed. Hey, we will never be the same. Hundreds of youths have passed through this program and will continue to because of your help and dedication. JJRP, you have been a tool of value to our nation.
Thank you very much for that spoken word and for being able to elucidate upon the achievements of the Juvenile Justice Reform Project in a way that was very special. I now invite the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Community Development, Culture, and Gender Affairs in St. Kitts and Nevis, Janelle Lewis, to give her reflections on the Juvenile Justice Reform Project.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. Allow me to adopt the protocol previously established. I'm not sure if I can ably follow that spoken word because the poet really said everything to how JJRP benefited us in St. Kitts and Nevis. But please bear with me as I did prepare something. So forgive me if I do it some of the sentiments that were shared earlier. Without a doubt, all of us present here today will agree that juvenile justice is a complex area. For successful outcomes, many actors ranging from various state agencies, private sector entities, NGOs, CBOs must all come together and work collectively and collaboratively if we are to see any successes. The JJRP came at a time when the government of St. Kitts and Nevis had recently passed into law several pieces of legislation that would transform the framework under which juvenile justice and child protection operated. In addition to this, we're preparing to open our new co-ed facility, the New Horizons Rehab Center, or the NHRC. As many persons would appreciate and attest to, change is seldom seamless. And the shift from a punitive approach to diversion, rehabilitation, and reintegration was filled with many obstacles and challenges. JJRP for St. Kitts and Nevis was therefore a buttress to help guide us along and to assist us in overcoming the various hurdles. The project helped to increase our institutional capacity and helped to enhance our professional practice through numerous training opportunities for workers and supporting stake actors. We were introduced to new programming and many new possibilities. While for various reasons, we were not able to fully implement some of the activities and the programs, officers were still able to incorporate in their day-to-day activities many of the principles and concepts that they would have learned and been exposed to during the numerous trainings and study tours. Then Kitts and Nevis benefited significantly from material and equipment upgrades at both the NHRC and the Yes to Success program in Nevis. In addition to the enhancement to our physical infrastructures and our inventories to be used for training and vocational skills development, JJRP provided opportunities for stakeholders to dialogue with each other. It helped us to build stronger partnerships and to reassure each other that while we had differing roles and responsibilities, our goals were the same. We were all working towards the same outcome. It also allowed us better insight into the challenges that our partner agencies were facing. It allowed us to sit together and come up with solutions to get over bottlenecks and to move forward. Every single voice counted for the JJRP. This included our young people, who are the beneficiaries of the Juvenile Justice Reform Project. It is no secret that many agencies in our region would perhaps get a failing grade for documentation. And I must apologize publicly to Dr. Radix and Marilyn and the other persons who have worked on JJRP for the many times that we would have mumbled under our breath and cursed at the numerous telephone calls, emails, reminders about the documentation, the statistical data that was required for JJRP. And although we complain, we do understand the importance. And what the constant reminders did for us was it actually helped us to improve on our own data collection practices. It has allowed us to now have at our fingertips relevant and pertinent data that can be used for future planning and policy development. This data serves as evidence for all of the work that has been done over the past 10 years. On behalf of St. Kitts and Nevis, I would like to thank USAID and the OECS Commission. I'd like to thank the fellow member states who would have participated, would have shared their best practices and their ideas with us. It has not been an easy road, but we have persevered. And as we come to a close for the JJRP, let us not relax. There has been too much work put in over the past 10 years for us to allow things to fall apart. Instead, we need to remain focused and to continue building upon the firm foundation that has been set to help our young people, the future leaders of the region, to overcome the challenges, to have second chances when necessary, to become productive citizens in our region. Thank you.
Over to you, Marilyn.
I now invite Mr. Martin Anthony, who is the National Coordinator for the Commonwealth of Dominica, my colleague, who will deliver the reflections on behalf of PS Silvani Button, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Youth Development and Empowerment, Youth at Risk, Gender Affairs, Senior Security, and Dominicans with Disabilities from the Commonwealth of Dominica.
The established protocol is observed. The Juvenile Justice Reform Project has in a number of ways assisted the participating member states, which resulted in improvements in the various child justice systems to include upgrades in the knowledge and skills of practitioners who interface with children. In this short reflection, I wish to highlight project assistance provided to the Commonwealth of Dominica under one component, that is Savory and Macy. Assistance covered training of probation officers and the supply of necessary manuals with the requisite tools. The training assisted probation officers in their preparedness to conduct assessments of children who have been charged by the police and brought before juvenile court. These tools have helped in making proper diagnosis. A major success occurred in that all reports now been submitted to the juvenile courts reflect certain diagnosis obtained through the use of Savory and Macy. Magistrate Gloria Augustus, who often sits in juvenile courts, has indicated that reports from probation officers now coming to juvenile courts are much improved with the advent of assessments through the use of Savory and Macy. In order to better understand these two words, Savory and Macy, I think it is incumbent on me, for those who are not clear, to provide an explanation. Savory refers to structured assessment of violence risk in youth. It is a risk assessment instrument designed to structure appraisals of violence and risk management plans for children, particularly in court-related matters. The Savory tool is used by probation officers to assess levels of risk to guide treatment plans. Importantly, though, the assessment should not only identify risk factors and the potential for violence conduct, but also the identification of protective factors which can diminish adverse impact. The acronym MASI, Massachusetts Youth Screening Instrument, is a screening tool designed especially for juveniles who may be presenting with behavioral and health needs. It contains 6 clinical scales, with each scale representing sets of behaviors through behaviors, thoughts, feelings, or symptoms associated with various behavioral and health problems. These include, among others, alcohol, drug use, suicidal ideation, and depressed, anxious behaviors. Data in regards to assessments undertaken by the probation service for the past months showed that 40 children were assessed. It is interesting to note that one of the predominant risk factors which featured on the Savory assessment was peer delinquency, which has a potential for further delinquent behaviors and violence. Disruptive behaviors also featured high. It is equally interesting that poor parental management was also featured, which, based on research, could have serious implications, including increased risk for violent behavior and delinquency. The data on assessment of children through the use of savory instrument also revealed that certain children were engaged in substance abuse, which again, based on research, could be sufficiently damaging to cause problems in physical health and also predisposes one to violent behavior. Protective factors identified after assessments include pro-social involvement, like engagement of those juveniles in sporting activities. A level of strong social support from parents and guardians was evident in some cases. On the matter of MACI and assessments undertaken by probation officers, the top sets of behaviors, thoughts, and symptoms which emerged are anger, irritable, traumatic experiences, and depressed, anxious behaviors. These suggest that very likely many more young people present with those issues. The question arises as to what are the predisposing factors, as our children are at very high risk, which could have serious implications for the society. Probation officers have engaged those children in rehabilitation programs, including counseling services. It is worth noting that on the matter of anger, through assistance provided under the project, many students were trained in the area of anger management under the anger replacement therapy known as ART program. I have taken time off to disclose those findings, as there is the ongoing need to constantly pay special attention to our young people and take proactive actions to address presenting needs. In closing, I wish to once again thank the USAID and OECS Commission for all that has been done on behalf of all member states which participated in the project, and in particular, the assistance provided to our practitioners and to the Commonwealth of Dominica, the government and people of this fair land. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Anthony. And Mr. Anthony noted a number of improvements in the system as a result of the JJRP project. He noted the knowledge and skills of officers at the Probation and the Welfare Department, and also improvements in the assessments that are being used to assess these young people, the MACI and the savory. He also mentioned the provision of manuals and tools, and also training of probation officers. A lot has been done under the JJRP, and we really have to thank the USAID and also the OECS Commission for providing the support to these young people. Sorry. We now invite everything we have been hearing so far about the JJRP has been music to our ears. But let us hear how JJRP has helped make music in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And here, we now invite the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Band to do a music reform.
I submitted a backdrop. It outlined, or it relates to a program that we have during the summer here where we deal with young children during the summer period. Our youth were heading in a certain direction, and our police force, we decided that we are going to play our part in having these youth divert from a life of crime into something worthwhile. And these meetings and discussions were held with the Ministry of National Mobilization, USAID, which is the United States Agency for International Development, and the OECS, the Organization of East and Caribbean States. We received just 20 odd pieces of musical instruments to facilitate this program.
I play steel band and I enjoy it. In fact, in my life, because I like it.
40 odd juveniles. 11 of those came from the Liberty Lodge Boys Training Center. The others came from surrounding communities, which are very much close to where we normally do the training.
The program impacted my life, so I could play my own music. I play pan and I enjoy it because it carried me far.
Programs like these are going to benefit the youth in having them more equipped for entry into society, jobs. And as I said earlier, some of the kids who are participating in this program thus far, all of them have not come into the field with the law. Some of them are going to school and are doing well. So the academics and the music joined together could definitely make life easy and happy for the young people to make money and try and make their family and nation as a whole a crime-free society. How can I forget USAID, who have contributed significantly to this program, and also the OECS Juvenile Justice Reform Project.
Over to you, Raim.
Another round of applause for the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Band Music Program. And programs like that are important because it ensures that the level of recidivism is reduced by ensuring that young people are diverted from the criminal justice system and in that system, or rather in the new system, able to attain skills that they never knew that they might have had before. At this time, I would like to invite Mr. Samuel St. Bernard, the Planning Officer in the Ministry of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs in Grenada, for a short reflection on the Juvenile Justice Reform Project.
Of the JJRP to our journey through the implementation of the JJRP Phase 2 within the Grenada's context has been a successful one. It significantly contributed to building on our systematic approaches for the effective delivery of services geared towards improving our juvenile justice responses. This project, by design, was needs-based oriented. Therefore, its deliverables were practical and directly applicable to our reality. Additionally, the outputs of Phase 2 of the project complemented the achievements of Phase 1, which places us on a good footing for future improvements. Under Phase 2 of the project, we were able to develop a juvenile justice policy. The juvenile justice policy supports the development of a juvenile justice system that keeps children safe, reduces offending, and addresses the age-specific needs of the child, while working collaboratively with all relevant stakeholders to prevent juvenile crime, divert as many children as possible away from offending, and support the reintegration of those that do offend. Subcomponents of the JJ policy: the strategic action plan, the Juvenile Justice Unit Plan, the monitoring and evaluation for National Juvenile Justice Policy and the Juvenile Unit as well. Development of the Juvenile Justice Unit Plan specifically will support us in terms of our structure and in terms of supporting our institutional strengthening. We also saw the review and the Juvenile Justice Act. There was also the use of screening tools, specifically as was spoken earlier, Maisley and Savory. The screening assessment tools were used by probation officers and other child service agencies when planning the most effective course of action for an individual child in conflict with the law or is at risk of being in conflict with the law. Savory is a structured assessment for violence risk in youth. This is designed to assess violent risk in adolescents, and this tool is also being used by the probation unit. Maisie, well, I'm not going to go through that again because my colleague would have covered that in the previous presentation. TerraScribe data management tool. TerraScribe is a client-based management information system that will be used in juvenile justice client data. Its features are intended for the management of all data relevant to social and psychosocial assessment of our juvenile clients. This software also facilitates network connection that allows service providers to share relevant client information, refer cases, and collaborative case management approaches. A virtual training was conducted in December 2020 between the Ministry of Social Development, Magistrates Court, Ministry of Education, and the Grand Bacolet Juvenile Rehabilitation and Treatment Center and the Royal Grenada Police Force. Capacity building training. Areas covered: cognitive development, youth brain development, family engaged case planning, motivational interviewing, supervisory training, reintegration and treatment plan, training for magistrates, training for police and prison officers on the juvenile justice system, gender and juvenile justice, capacity building of mentors, of course, TerraScribe, JACE assessment tool, and Savory. We also saw the development of a new program, the National Hype Mentoring Program, which is our pride and joy. The National Hype Mentorship Programs, that acronyms represents or stands for the National Harnessing Youth Potential Excellence Mentoring Program. The framework is developed around the context of providing alternative adult support and guidance to children in conflict with the law. The vision is that through the mentor-mentee relationship, mentors will foster positive behavior, which will facilitate the mentee's transition to fulfilling their full potential. The HYPE mentoring program was approved by Cabinet in January 2021. And the Marion Community Center has been identified as the most suitable facility at the moment to pilot this program for 1 year. On the JJRP, we would have benefited from the support to retrofit the building as well, and to provide equipment and furnishing for the community center to support the implementation of the pilot. We also would have received a number of equipment, specifically on the phase 2. We would have received 5 laptops, 2 computers, etc. I'm not going to go into the details, but we would have gotten the equipment and, as I said, furniture support and retrofitting support for the the center so that we can ensure that it is fit for use when the pilot is being implemented. Programs at the Grand Bachelet Rehabilitation and Treatment Center, the USAID and OECS JJRP project phase 2 has supported the strengthening of the rehabilitation program at the Bachelet Center. Example of support areas: equipment for the poultry farm. Residents are now allowed to participate based on interest and ability and to accept responsibility. Renovation of the IT lab. The IT lab was completed in December 2021. Right now, it is fit and ready for use. National Diversion Rehabilitation and Reintegration Strategy. And this strategy is a toolkit which was developed by Mrs. Jacqueline C. Burke. And the purpose of this is to guide the delivery of juvenile justice services. My greatest delight, however, of the project experience is knowing that we are better able to serve our children in conflict with the law. Because as we are aware, it is more often the case than not that some aspect of their familial and societal networks has failed them in one way or the other. The fundamental principle of the project is second chance based, guided by rehabilitation and care-based approaches, because a lot of our children who are deemed in need of care and protection are many times the same children who end up in conflict with the law. We would like to express our sincerest appreciation to the OECS Commission for the support over the years. Thank you to the team members, both past and present. It was a pleasure working with you. We say thanks to USAID for the financial support and commitment to the cause. It is well appreciated. Thanks to the Juvenile Justice Unit, the Psychosocial Unit, the Grand Bachelet Rehabilitation and Treatment Center, the Probation Unit, the Social Policy Planning and Project Unit, the Juvenile Justice Intersector Committee. We appreciate your commitment and partnership. Let's keep in mind that transformation requires a team effort. I would like to single out Ms. Carla Bain, the social worker with responsibility for juvenile justice. She has been the fuel to the juvenile justice engine over the years. And you know her effort needs no explanation because it speaks for itself. I will in good faith say that I look forward to working with every stakeholder present today, not only in the general context as it relates to our national juvenile justice agenda, but within the context of the implementation of another phase of the Juvenile Justice Reform Project. I say thank you to all and do enjoy the rest of the ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel St. Bernard. Marilyn? So as we bring down the curtains on the Juvenile Justice Reform Project, we now have our final musical presentation, which is coming to us live from St. Lucia. So let us listen to the young men from the St. Lucia Boys Training Center, who will bring us a live presentation here, streamed and echoed into the rooms and houses across the OECS.
Thank you very much to the boys at the Boys Training Center. That was a very insightful rendition. Okay, we have now come to the close of the Juvenile Justice Reform to Last Mile project. And we would like to say our many thanks to all the member states and stakeholders who have been very instrumental in working with the team at the OECS and USAID. Dr. Carlin Radix is the head of the Human and Social Division in the OECS Commission, and she has been working very closely with the team at the OECS to implement the many activities of the Juvenile Justice Reform Project. As aforementioned, the project focused on many reforms, which included passing of legislations, development and strengthening of diversion, reintegration, and rehabilitation programs, finalization of the national diversion strategies, and development of a toolkit and standard operating procedures, among others. All to provide opportunities and initiatives that will create a community of young persons who are willing to move ahead and to succeed in life. These opportunities are provided for by USAID through the OECS Commission, and we stand in solidarity with all the 6 member states, the OECS Commission, and the USAID to say thank you and to send out our appreciation to seeing these move ahead towards the benefits of those who need it the most, the youth, especially those at risk and in conflict to the law. We now invite Dr. Carlin Radix, head of the Human and Social Division, to give the closing remarks.
Just on the verge of beginning afternoon. We've done pretty well for time, I think. We're just at 12 o'clock. Honorable Ministers, Honorable Dean Jonas, Minister in the Ministry of Social Transformation, Human Resource Development and the Blue Economy in Antigua and Barbuda, Honorable Alice King, Minister for Youth Development and Empowerment, Youth at Risk, Gender Affairs, Senior Security, and Dominicans with Disabilities at Commonwealth of Dominica, Honorable Philip Alfred Telesford, Minister for Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs in Grenada, and Senator the Honorable Glorianne Thomas, Minister of State with responsibility for social development and gender affairs within the Ministry of Social and Community Development, Housing and Gender Affairs in Grenada. Our Director General, His Excellency Dr. Didicus Jules, USAID Representative for the Eastern and Southern Caribbean, Mr. Clinton White, Permanent Secretaries of Social Development and Youth-Related Ministries, and allow me in the room in St. Lucia to recognize P.S. Elizabeth Bailey, Ministry of Home Affairs and National Security, and P.S. Belder Octave Joseph, Ministry of Equity, Social Justice, Local Government, and Empowerment. OECS, JJRP country teams, focal points, OECS Commission project staff, other government officials, OECS Commission staff, specially invited guests, all stakeholders, media, people of the OECS. Oh, it's a mouthful. It's only because I don't want it to end. This journey of juvenile justice reform has not been a sprint, or is not a sprint because we're still running it. It's a marathon. And it's not just a marathon, it's a relay. We keep passing the baton. I've heard of the 5-year, or some people say the 10-year Chinese bamboo, which apparently for 5 years does not grow or show itself above the ground, but you must continue to tend to it and water it. And at year 5 or year 10, depending on who you listen to, it shoots up, and then like bamboo does, it grows. The juvenile justice reform process in the Eastern Caribbean is like the 5-year Chinese bamboo, and it has now begun to take off. And there are many people to thank. So let me begin by thanking Mr. Martin Anthony, who set us off in the right direction in prayer at the beginning of these proceedings. We then had a fantastic presentation by the Umoja, and I learned a bit of Swahili today, Convent High School from Dominica. And for those of us who were not in Dominica, we really got the sign language, because due to technical difficulties, we couldn't hear the sound, but it was a beautiful presentation. The leadership of our Director General has been instrumental in ensuring the continuous process that we've been undergoing over the last 10 years. And he gave his commitment in his welcome remarks, and I want to especially recognize him and his role in this process. Of course, Mr. Clinton White, thank you for being here today and giving your remarks, but more importantly, thank you for being the partner, the face of the partner that we have in USAID, and for the young people within the OECS region. We heard remarks from several of our permanent secretaries. Thank you for sharing what the impact has been for JJRP in our respective countries. And more importantly, we heard moving renditions from various member states, and I'd like to really single out those presentations because the young people were brave and they shared deeply personal things with us. We had the poem from Torishore Simon in Antigua and Barbuda. We heard the spoken word from the team in Nevis. And of course, we had the live rendition right here in St. Lucia of the Boys Training Center. And I saw you guys dancing at your tables. So thank you to all of the young people who presented here today for their various renditions. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. My final thank you is to every single person, past and present. Within USAID, we've had champions. Within the OECS Commission, past and present. It would take me too long to name all the names, but you know who you are if you're listening online or if you're with us in person. For all of the member states, we know the persons who have been there from the beginning, before the beginning, and continue in this relay. And finally, I want to thank all of you who are present here today, who have given up your time and your commitment to this process, and who are joining us in this celebration. And lastly, let me say thank you to the young people who have taken the opportunity to turn their lives around and to take opportunity of the second chance. So thanks to everyone. And I think depending on where you are, announcements will be in your own rooms. But at this point in time, we say goodbye and good night from our live feed. Thank you.